Okay, so we know that there has been a concerted effort to not only not recognize natural immunity, but to discredit it as well. And now we're finding out this may have started in a closed-door FDA meeting. That's right. Dr. Paul Offit, director of the Vaccine Education Center at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and an FDA panel member, talks about it on ZDogg MD's show. Let's watch.
And I can tell you this, I don't think this was a confidential meeting. Hopefully it wasn't, but I was asked along with three other people to advise the administration on whether or not natural infection should count as a vaccine. I think that you just have to say, how are you going to show that you were naturally infected? So I think PCR would not be the way I would go. I would show that you have antibodies, say, to viral nuclear protein, just that, because that way you know that you've been naturally infected, because that's not something you would get from a vaccine. So you could do that, for example. So bureaucratically, that's tough. I understand that. But the four of us were asked to comment on, did we think natural infection basically should count in situations where the vaccine is mandated? And I was one of the two people that said yes. The other two people said no. But what was funny about that meeting, so it was Vivek Murthy, who's the U.S. Surgeon General.
He's a friend, yeah.
Yeah, from CDC, and Francis Collins, who's still head of NIH, and Tony Fauci. So Vivek, who's a very sweet and kind man, started off saying, let's go around and just introduce ourselves first. So Francis Collins goes, Francis Collins, NIH. And, Rochelle goes, Rochelle Walensky, CDC. It's like, we're not asking you to introduce yourselves. We know who you are. It's like, I'm sorry, Tony, what was that last name again? I didn't catch that.
Okay, so what we gather from this is that there was a meeting. There were 5 people involved. 4 of them were asked to give their vote on whether or not natural immunity should count. We know that Dr. Paul Offit voted to allow natural immunity to count, something that has counted for every other single virus in existence until now. Suddenly, natural immunity doesn't matter. So it's unclear from listening to this little clip here who the others were that were voting. So there was 5 of them in the room that we could tell. 4 of them were being asked to vote, and they were asked to give advice to the administration. So I would guess that maybe so it's hard to know. Was it Anthony Fauci who was the one that they were voting to, voting at, and then Anthony Fauci would go back to the administration and say, this is what people think? Or was it Rochelle Walensky from the CDC? So it makes so hard to say. I think it was probably Anthony Fauci who was not voting necessarily in that particular meeting, but he was the one that they were giving their information to and giving their advice to. And then Anthony Fauci was to relay that to the administration. However, because it was a split vote, 2-2, that makes me believe then obviously Anthony Fauci sided with those who were against natural immunity, because as we know, natural immunity, unlike in Europe, unlike in other parts of the world, natural immunity in the United States doesn't count. So what we know is we have Dr. Paul Offit, Rochelle Walensky from the CDC, then you have Francis Collins from the NIH, and the Surgeon General. My guess is the Surgeon General and Dr. Paul Offit said yes, natural immunity. I'm just guessing. We know Dr. Paul Offit said yes, but I would guess who probably also voted alongside him was the Surgeon General. We don't hear a lot from the Surgeon General in this pandemic much, but we do hear a lot from Rochelle Walensky and from Francis Collins, who are both, we know, very much in line with Anthony Fauci. So that would be my guess if I had to guess who voted how. And we should know this. We should know how they voted, because there have been some serious consequences to that vote. This is a complete policy blunder. In fact, a real bureaucratic way to go about this. Dr. Vinay Prasad commented on the video saying that a single vote taken in secret in the USA has led to a horrific policy blunder, ignoring natural immunity and massive human suffering, fired workers, deepening vaccine polarization. Historians should listen. Yes, and look at all the people that were fired because they were unwilling to take the vaccine, even with natural immunity. So people who had natural immunity, they didn't want to take the vaccine. These were nurses, doctors on the front line. Many of them had caught COVID. Many of the people that were working in factories, making sure we could get food to eat during the lockdowns, they were catching COVID. They recovered from COVID, many of them. Some of them did not. Very tragic. But others did. And then when they return to work, they're later told a year later, if they're not willing to take a vaccine, that they are a pariah on society, that they're a danger to society, and that they're going to now lose their job. And of course, this has deepened vaccine polarization, and this has deepened vaccine hesitancy, because they kept saying to us, if you all take the vaccine, the pandemic ends. If you take the vaccine, you won't get COVID. If you take the vaccine, XY, you won't spread COVID. And we now know that is not true either. So this has all been, rather than following the science like they claimed they were doing, they just followed bureaucracy, they followed fear, they followed their donors or their constituents or whoever it was that were swaying them. And we end up where we are, which is, I don't know where we are with all of this. No better off in a lot of ways. I mean, just the policy wise. In fact, we're worse off now because we've got protests breaking out everywhere, people losing their jobs, a lot of people becoming depressed. I mean, I think we're in a much worse place, actually. I don't think I could say we're no better off. I think we're actually much worse off, quite frankly, than the beginning of the pandemic. Now, Dr. Marty Makary, a Johns Hopkins public policy researcher, was censored on LinkedIn. Believe it or not, look at this. I'm sure you can believe this, actually. I don't need to say believe it or not. You can believe that LinkedIn, of course, censored him. This was for a Journal of American Medical Association study, that he participated in on natural immunity. And look what he says here. LinkedIn took it down because he said, quote, the data doesn't fit the narrative. LinkedIn did eventually reinstate the post after Dr. Makary's friend complained to the CEO. So apparently you have to have some connections in order to be uncensored after being censored in today's world. But the JAMA study released this month, which is titled Prevalence and Durability of SARS-CoV-2 Antibodies Among Unvaccinated U.S. Adults by History of COVID-19, says sectional study of unvaccinated U.S. adults, antibodies were detected in 99% of individuals who reported a positive COVID-19 test result, in 55% who believed they had COVID-19 but were never tested, and in 11% who believed they had never had COVID-19 infection. Anti-RBD levels were observed after a positive COVID-19 test result up to 20 months, extending previous 6-month durability data. So they were, even if they were wanting to recognize natural immunity, they said, yeah, but it only lasts for 6 months. And this study shows, well, no, it lasts 20 months. It's very robust. People that tested positive, 99% of them ended up having antibodies. So that shows that the PCR tests are fairly accurate. Rapid tests, on the other hand, it would be interesting to see how many of the people who tested positive on the rapid tests ultimately went on to test positive for antibodies. That would be interesting to find out. That would kind of give us a clue on how accurate those tests are. People who thought they had COVID, they suspected it, turns out 50-50, toss a coin. If you think you had COVID, it's a 50-50 chance you actually did have COVID. And then there was 11% of people who didn't think they ever had COVID. They're like, no, I never had COVID. And then they tested them and found out, now you did have COVID. So those people never even got sick. Right? They didn't even think they had COVID. And that 20 months, by the way, does not even take into consideration B cells and T cells. We know that once the antibody wears off, that for other viruses, B cell and T cell memory kicks in if you come into contact with the virus again. So even if you don't have the antibodies in your blood and they don't test when you test, there's no detection of them. When your body comes into contact with the virus, those B cell and T cells kick in and say, hey, we remember this. And they start manufacturing the antibodies from what I gather. So we don't even know how long this natural immunity actually lasts. We do know, because your antibodies could wear off after 20 months, but then you could still have B cell, T cell. We do know, though, that the variants, as they evolve, you have less immunity. So Omicron has come along, and of course, people who've had COVID before, maybe they had the original strain, they're then getting reinfected with Omicron. So now we're knowing that there's probably not any lifelong immunity to COVID. It is probably going to be like the flu, where you catch it and you have a level of immunity to certain strains. So maybe you are protected in certain years. You're not going to get that strain of flu. Maybe you're not going to get it for a few years, but then you're going to catch the flu again. Most of us, I think, in our lives have had the flu more than once. So it's looking like COVID is going to be more like the flu, which then, of course, calls more into question the entire premise behind vaccine passports to begin with. So they're pointless if you can't be immune to the virus, or if your immunity wears off, like we know with the vaccine it does, or if the immunity doesn't last because variants come along, whatever it might be. It just, again, calls into question the science behind these vaccine passports. And yet here we are, people are protesting in the streets. They're being trampled by horses. They're having their pets taken away. They're being hunted down and locked up and their bank accounts seized in Canada because they want to have a decision for them. They want to make the choice for themselves whether or not they want to take a medicine. That's all they're asking from their government. They're saying, let me decide for myself. And their government is saying, you don't get that choice because now you're a terrorist if you even want that choice. If you want bodily autonomy, you want the right to make your own medical decisions, you are a terrorist. That's what they're saying to people in Canada. And that's how people are treated here in the United States. We haven't quite gotten to that level like they have in Canada. I think largely because we do have a lot of states' rights in the United States that I don't think that they have as much in Canada. I don't think that their different provinces are as independent as our individual states are here in the United States. So, if you really don't like the way the government is being run, like here in California, for example, I could always pick up and move to Florida or to Texas. Now, the federal government could try to do some things to us here. I don't know if they're going to go that far anymore. I think that they're realizing we've got bigger fish to fry right now with the economy going haywire. So, and do you really want to make that worse? I don't know. It seems like in Canada they are. So I figured at this point by now, once everyone realized that the vaccine did not stop the spread, it didn't stop the spread with Delta. It's not just Omicron. The vaccines wore off. Then with Omicron, they don't seem to work at stopping Omicron really for long, a couple of weeks at most. So I thought for sure that governments would come to their senses and they would stop this whole mandate nonsense. I'm so tempted to have people go into restaurants here in LA and be like, oh, I have an active COVID infection, but here's my vaccine card. You have to let me in, right? Because that's the rule. So it doesn't matter if I have an active COVID infection. As long as I have the vaccine card, I can come in and eat at your restaurant or sit in your bar, watch these movies, right? I would love to see how well that goes. I mean, what can people even do about that? So anyway, I'm not encouraging any sort of behavior. I'm not encouraging it. Anyway, I've said too much. Now I better go before they shut my channel down on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for being here. This is a sham. This is bureaucratic. I would like to know who was in that meeting. I would like to know who voted against natural immunity. I believe that we, the people, deserve to know. We deserve to know who is responsible for this debacle, and we have the right to hold them accountable for this horrible policy blunder. They should lose their jobs, and because they forced so many other people to lose theirs. Thanks so much for watching. Email me, kim@KimIverson.com. You can also find me on my locals community. That is where I post pictures and video from my personal life, plus do live streams that are more casual. So be sure to check out that community. It's a lot of fun there. People post a lot of wonderful, amazing information on the community wall. So it's a really great place to learn a lot from other people. So thank you so much. The link is down below. Or if you're watching on Rumble, the link is in the corner. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.